Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for this week's Lunch and Learn for Leaders and those who want to be. I'm your host, Jill Valdez of Link Consulting, and I'm excited to talk about a topic that many of us face, but often don't discuss openly: imposter syndrome. Now, before we dive in, let's do a quick poll to see how many of you have ever experienced feelings of self-doubt or believing you're not as competent as others think you are. Raise your hand if you can relate to this. All right. Thanks for your honesty. It's way more common than we realize. So, imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon where individuals doubt their skills, talents, or accomplishments and have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. Despite evident success or external validation, those experiencing this syndrome, they often believe they don't deserve their achievements. Some of the key characteristics that we see is self-doubt. Individuals often feel that they're not as competent as others perceive them to be. And this leads to a chronic sense of inadequacy, even when there's tangible evidence of success. Another thing we see is an attribution of its success to external factors. Those with imposter syndrome tend to attribute their achievements to luck, timing, or help from others rather than their own abilities and hard work. Another piece of imposter syndrome is perfectionism. Many individuals strive for perfection in their tasks, leading to excessive stress and burnout. And they may set unrealistically high standards for themselves and feel disappointed when they can't meet them. Another thing is a fear of failure. This fear can be paralyzing, making individuals avoid taking risks or pursuing opportunities that could lead to growth or recognition. They often worry that a single mistake will expose them as a fraud. And then we see comparison to others. Constantly comparing oneself to peers or mentors, that can exacerbate feelings of inadequacy. Individuals may feel that everyone else is way more capable or deserving of success. Now, research shows that around 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome at some point in their careers, regardless of their level of success or their expertise. This is particularly prevalent among high achievers, women, and minority groups. So let's talk about some common myths in regards to imposter syndrome. Only new or experienced individuals or inexperienced individuals have imposter syndrome. In reality, even seasoned professionals and leaders can grapple with these feelings. Another myth is, if I were truly competent, I wouldn't feel this way. Well, it's crucial to understand that feeling like an imposter doesn't reflect your actual abilities or worth. So now that we have a better understanding of what imposter syndrome is, and how it manifests, let's take a moment to share some experiences with it. So drop in the comments below and discuss a time where you felt like an imposter. I'd love to hear a few of your stories. So now let's talk about the impact of imposter syndrome, especially on leadership. Now, imposter syndrome, it doesn't just affect your mindset. It can significantly impact your effectiveness as a leader. When left unchecked, these feelings of inadequacy can ripple through your leadership style, affecting your decision-making, relationships, and overall performance. So let's take a deeper look at how imposter syndrome can actually manifest in leadership. We mentioned it already, decision-making. Leaders with imposter syndrome may second-guess their decisions, afraid that they're going to make the wrong choice and expose their perceived inadequacies. Overthinking becomes very common, which causes delays in decision-making. And this can lead to missed opportunities or maybe stagnation or a reluctance to take a calculated risk, which are critical for driving growth and innovation. Imagine you're in a meeting where a bold decision is needed. Rather than trusting your judgment, you defer to others, feeling unqualified to make the final call, even though you may be the most informed on the issue. Another key area impacted by imposter syndrome is delegation and micromanagement. You see, leaders who experience imposter syndrome, they may have trouble delegating tasks because they feel they need to prove their worth by doing everything themselves. Alternatively, they may micromanage team members, believing that if something goes wrong, it will reflect poorly on their leadership. This creates a really stressful environment for both the leader and the team. Here's an example. You might find yourself double checking every piece of work your team completes, not because they're incapable, but because you fear their mistakes will highlight your own shortcomings. Another place of impact is relationships and team dynamics. Leaders may struggle to build strong relationships with their teams if they feel they don't deserve their position. They may distance themselves or avoid tough conversations, fearing that exposing vulnerability will make others lose confidence in them. Of course, we have talked about that at great length, about how being vulnerable really helps a team actually come around you, and it builds and solidifies you as a leader. But imposter syndrome, it impacts that. It can also lead to inconsistent feedback, either being too lenient to avoid conflict or being overly critical, driven by their own internal pressure. This results in poor communication and a lack of trust within the team. Here's an example. As a leader, you might avoid giving feedback to a high-performing team member because you fear that they'll realize you're not on their level, ultimately stifling their development. Leaders with imposter syndrome may downplay their own achievements or avoid taking credit for success, which can undermine their credibility and confidence in the eyes of others. This affects how they are perceived by their peers and their team. They may struggle with imposter-induced self-sabotage, where they unintentionally limit their visibility or their contributions in order to avoid attention. The other thing that it impacts is innovation and growth. Imposter syndrome can block leaders from stepping out of their comfort zones. Leaders may avoid taking on new challenges because they fear failure or exposure. All this does is stifles personal growth, and it limits the potential of their teams and their organizations. Fear of failure may prevent leaders from experimenting or implementing bold ideas, even halfway bold ideas, even when innovation is needed for organizational success. Here's an example. You avoid introducing a new initiative because you fear it might fail, and instead you stick to the status quo. But that's limiting both you and your team's growth. Imposter syndrome not only affects individual performance, but it can have a widespread impact on team dynamics, organizational growth, and leadership potential. So recognizing these effects is the first step towards overcoming them and unlocking your full potential as a leader. So let's talk about recognizing the signs, because really that's going to be your first step in overcoming it. So here's some indicators that you might be dealing with imposter syndrome. Overworking or burnout due to fear of not being good enough. Attributing success to external factors rather than your own abilities. Feeling like you're faking it in your role. So let's do a quick assessment. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 means not at all and 5 means very much, how do you resonate with these signs? Again, overworking or burnout, attributing success to external factors, or feeling like you're faking it in your role. Feel free to share your scores if you're comfortable in the comments below. All right, let's get to the meat of what we came here for. Let's talk about some strategies to overcome imposter syndrome. So now that we've identified what it is and how it impacts leadership, we're going to take some actionable strategies to overcome it. These strategies will help you build confidence, shift your mindset, and lead with authenticity. By implementing these tools, you can begin to unlock your true leadership potential. So number 1, reframe your thinking. Shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. You see, imposter syndrome, it often thrives in a fixed mindset where you believe your abilities are static and any failures are a reflection of personal inadequacy. Adopting a growth mindset means understanding that skills and talents can be developed over time through effort, learning, and persistence. This allows you to see challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats to your competence. Here's a tip. When faced with self-doubt, ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience instead of, what does this say about my abilities? Focus on facts, not feelings. That's number 2. You see, imposter syndrome, it is driven by feelings, but feelings are not always an accurate reflection of reality. Shift your thinking by focusing on facts and data, particularly when evaluating your success. Now, I want to take a little bit of a side note here for a second. Your feelings are valid. We say in our household, feelings aren't right or wrong, they just are. They are valid, but that doesn't make them fact. And so you shouldn't determine your actions and your next steps based on how you feel. That's where looking at the facts comes into play. So here's a tip for you. Here's something that you can try. Keep a journal of your accomplishments and include measurable outcomes like goals achieved, positive feedback from colleagues. Somebody said something nice or great job, or maybe keeping a list of successful projects. And when doubt creeps in, review these. Go back and read through your journal because it will ground yourself in reality. Number 3, challenge negative self-talk. We often don't realize how our inner dialogue shapes our beliefs. Now, if you catch yourself thinking, I don't deserve to be here, or I'm not good enough, challenge these thoughts. Ask yourself, is there evidence to support this thought? You'll often find that these negative thoughts are based on fear rather than reality. Own your success. Acknowledge and internalize your accomplishments, because people with imposter syndrome, like I said, they attribute their success to other things like luck or help from others, but learn to take ownership of your achievements and recognize that your skills and effort played a significant role. Going back to that journal, after every success, make a habit of writing down 3 specific things you did that contributed to the outcome. Celebrate small wins. Sometimes we only recognize major accomplishments and overlook the smaller day-to-day victories that also demonstrate our capabilities. And then build a strong support system. Seek out mentors and allies. Surround yourself with trusted colleagues and friends who can provide objective feedback, encouragement, and support. You don't want to have a bunch of people around you who are just going to say, oh, you're so great, and not give you actual real feedback. But when your friends, when your support system, when they tell you things like, wow, that was a great job, take that to heart and know that they really do mean that. That's reality. Having someone who can validate your success and help you see your worth from an outside perspective is invaluable. Maybe you can seek out a mentor or a coworker who's gone through similar challenges and can offer advice on overcoming imposter syndrome in leadership. One of the best ways to combat imposter syndrome is to talk about it. When you express your doubts and fears, you often realize that there's a lot of people around you that feel the same way, including successful leaders. So maybe create or even join a peer group where you can openly share struggles and exchange experiences, offer mutual support. We've talked about vulnerability in the past and embracing that vulnerability as a leader. I know that so many, especially those who struggle with imposter syndrome, they feel like they always have to put on a brave front and they always have to seem like they have all the answers. and that they're the ones that can be counted on for all things. But that's not reality. Understand that vulnerability is a strength. It is not a weakness. I'm going to say that again. Understand that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. Leaders often feel that they need to project confidence and certainty at all times. But I'm telling you, vulnerability, it builds trust and deeper connections. It is okay to admit that you don't have all the answers or that you're still learning. Your team will respect your authenticity. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Overcoming imposter syndrome, it requires stepping outside of your comfort zone and confronting feelings of self-doubt. Understand that growth comes from that discomfort, and each step you take outside your comfort zone is a step towards actual, real, greater confidence. So set a goal to take one small risk each week that pushes you slightly beyond your comfort zone, whether it's leading a new project, speaking up in a meeting, or asking for feedback. Here's another key for you to overcome that imposter syndrome. Reframe failure as a learning opportunity. Change your relationship with failure. Leaders with imposter syndrome often view failure as like a personal flaw. However, failure is a natural part of leadership, and it's essential for growth. There's tons of books out there. John Maxwell wrote a book called Failing Forward. We learn from our failures. Instead of avoiding failure, embrace it as an opportunity to learn and improve. When you go through an experience and you're like, oh man, that was horrible, I failed. Rather than sitting there and like pondering over that and continuing to tell yourself how bad you are, ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? Or how can I use this setback to improve my skills? Don't let perfectionism hold you back. It is easy to get caught up thinking, I'm the leader, I have to be perfect all the time. But that's just not reality. There is nobody that is perfect all the time. Imposter syndrome, it fuels this need for perfectionism where you fear any mistake will expose your inadequacies. But perfection is an unrealistic standard, and focusing on it can prevent progress and growth. Strive for excellence, not perfection. Focus on continuous improvement rather than flawless performance. If you want to share a strategy that stood out to you from what we've just been talking about, I'd love for you to put it into the comments. Because overcoming imposter syndrome is not something that happens overnight. It's a process of reframing your thinking, owning your achievements, and being vulnerable enough to ask for support. By implementing these strategies, you can start to break the cycle of self-doubt and unlock your true leadership potential. So let's talk about the role of leadership in overcoming imposter syndrome. Because you see, as leaders, we have a unique opportunity to create an environment where others feel safe to express their insecurities. Here's some ways to do that effectively. First of all, encourage openness. Share your own experiences with imposter syndrome. So often it's easy for people to go, you're the leader, you look at you, you're up there and you've got it all together and you never make mistakes. We all started as a new person in a company. We've all had an entry-level job. Like, nobody was born and just came out and was like, whoo, here I am and I'm so amazing. We all have a story. We all have experiences. So share those so that others can learn from you. Foster a growth mindset. Emphasize learning from mistakes rather than fearing them. And then celebrate achievements. Acknowledge and celebrate both individual and team successes. All right, so to wrap up, let's create a personal action plan. take a moment to write down one specific action that you're going to take this week to combat imposter syndrome. It could be sharing your feelings with a colleague, or seeking feedback, or practicing self-compassion. Write that down, and if you want to share your action plan, be sure to drop that in the comments below. Thank you all so much for being here. If you have any questions or want to have further discussion, make sure you can drop that into the comments and I will definitely answer those. You can email me at jvaldez@linkconsulting.info, and I'd love to talk more with you. Once again, I'm Jill Valdez of Link Consulting, where we're working with people to become confident leaders of committed teams providing stellar service. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also find out more about the services I provide by visiting linkconsulting.info. When you go there, you'll have the opportunity to download my free ebook. Remember, overcoming imposter syndrome is a journey, and you're not alone. Embrace your true leadership potential and support one another in this process. I hope to see you at next week's Lunch and Learn, where we will be discussing mastering the balancing act, leading effectively while managing operations. Have a great day. Bye.